Good evening. It is such a pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. I'm Janet Steinmayer. I'm the president of Lesley University, and I have to say it's a joy to see so many Lesley friends, faculty, staff, and community members here tonight. This past summer, Hans Strauch, who is our board chair, requested that I go to Nantucket, which is long family summer place, for a Friday afternoon to hear him give a version of the speech that you're going to hear tonight. Wow, I thought, what a wonderful board chair that he's requiring me to go to Nantucket. But then I heard his speech. And I returned that favor by asking him to speak tonight, which I think has cost him several weekends of work and a lot of sleepless nights. Hans, I think that's the nature of presidential chair relationships. But the upshot, of course, is that for the first time in the 10 years of the Strauch-Mosse Lecture Series, you will hear the story that led to its creation. It's an extremely moving and important story on many levels, and I can't tell you how delighted I am that we are all going to have the opportunity to hear it tonight. So now I would like to introduce you to Amy Dinas, who I am thrilled to say joined us in July as our new Dean of Lesley Art and Design. I'm going to turn the mic over to her to welcome you and our student speaker.
Wow, it's like my first public presentation and everyone's here. It's not starting small. It's like, oh, here's the butterflies. All right, I'll get through this. Greetings and good evening. My name is Amy Dinas. I am the Dean of the College of Art and Design here at Lesley University, and I have been here for 3.5 months now, and I have to say it's an amazing place, an amazing staff, faculty, community, and so I'm just feel really blessed and lucky to be here. That's goes without saying. On behalf of Lesley University students, faculty, staff, university leadership, and our community, we are delighted to welcome Hans Strauch as our distinguished guest this evening. Tonight's lecture is a part of the Strauch-Mosse Lecture Series, which began in 2008 and is made possible through the generosity of tonight's speaker, Hans. This endowed lecture series enables the university to bring world-renowned and award-winning artists to campus in support of our commitment to artistic and cultural inquiry and to support the advancement of the university's mission toward diverse culture and artistic literacy. On a personal note, as a fellow architect, I was very excited to hear that our director of our board is also an architect. And that makes this presentation to me even more relevant and appropriate coming from his lens. And earlier this evening, I asked him if he was going to talk about the actual building that he constructed. And so I'm thrilled to know that that's going to be part of tonight's lecture. His generosity and foresight in establishing the significant series of talks exposes our community to some of the most accomplished artists and designers and now architects of our time. I'd like to just stop here and give Hans a round of applause. So here tonight, I will be introducing our distinguished speaker. He is our distinguished speaker. One of my students will be introducing Hans, Jasper Sanchez. Jasper, who is currently a senior, is a Colombian-American student enrolled in the undergraduate art history and critical theory program here at LASD. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, his immersion in public and contemporary art through the Wynwood Art District in Art Basel, Miami, inspired him to focus his studies on contemporary curatorial practice with an interest on queer Latin scholarship. Last summer, he was his first public art intern to work with our one of our community partnerships, the Rose Kennedy Greenlight Conservancy. Jasper has worked with the college on socially engaged projects public art pieces, and in Cambridge area. His interest lies in intersecting contemporary curatorial practice with social engagement and effort to provide a platform for artists from diverse backgrounds to create accessible and meaningful art for communities both local and global. Please join me in welcoming Jasper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fall lecture. Can you hear me well? I know the microphone's not too
Not well.
Not well.
Use the microphone.
Talk in.
Into it?
Yeah.
Like that? All right. There's a
Thank you.
whole thing in my way. There we go. All right. Well, again, welcome to our fall lecture, and thank you for welcoming me this evening to introduce our guest speaker, Hans Strauch. Tonight, Hans will speak of his family's experience before and after World War II. As prominent Berlin publishers, philanthropists, and art collectors, the Mosse family became the targets of Nazi anti-Semitism when their flagship newspaper, the Berliner Tageblatt, became openly critical of Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist movement. They were forced to flee Germany in 1933, leaving behind the Mosse Palais, their family residence in the heart of Berlin's cultural district, as well as their extensive art collection. Both were confiscated by the Nazi Party, and an Allied air raid destroyed the family home in 1945. Eventually, the Berlin Wall would run through its ruins. When local architect and Mosse family member, Hans Strauch, returned to the site of the Mosse Palais after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was nothing left of his family's once majestic structure, but not for long. As the founder and president of HDS Architecture in Cambridge, Strauch was given the remarkable opportunity to design the reincarnation of the former residence in 1996. The Strauch-Mosse family subsequently funded the Mosse Art Restitution Project, which has successfully recovered and reclaimed several works from the lost collection. At the genesis of my curatorial studies, I learned the etymology for the word curator, from the Latin curator, meaning overseer, manager, guardian. In the late 14th century, a curate was a spiritual guide or parish priest. From the medieval Latin curatus, meaning one responsible for the care of souls. Although the definition and role of curator has changed throughout the canon of art history, the genesis of care and care for art and culture has stayed with me. I think of art as the soul of culture and community. HDS Architecture and the Mosse Art Restitution Project are not primarily curatorial projects, but they are rooted in the preservation and restoration of the art and culture lost to the crimes of history. For that alone, I am both inspired and thankful to the legacy of the Strauch-Mosse family. Please join me in welcoming Hans Strauch.
Does everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. David, do you hear me? Yes. All right, I got this right here. So thank you so much. I was told only 30 people were going to be showing up. It's great to have everybody here today. I am so excited about telling you this story. It's really it's a personal story, and I must say I have friends in the audience. I'm looking at one right now who I went to college with who never really knew much about this. And there are many others here. I think we're going to be learning a lot all together, and it's somewhat of a coming out party, if you will. And I thank Janet for convincing me to do this. It has been a lot of hard work, but it's definitely been worth it. I do want to say that, as you'll find out, I've been involved with Lesley University for probably, well, not probably, over 20 years. And you'll find out why today. Approximately 10 years ago, we started this this program, this Strauch-Mosse Lecture series. And it was not my idea. It was an idea of our then president and then dean, president of Lesley University and dean of the Arts College. They are both here this evening. Joseph Moore, Dr. Moore, and Stan Trecker. They came to me with this brilliant idea that just blew me out of the water. Both of you are here. I want to thank you so much. It's really interesting. Art play such a major role in our institution now. We did this at the time when we were moving Art Institute of Boston, which was part of Lesley at the time, from Boston to our Cambridge campus. And we felt that we needed to do something rather than wait. How many years did this project take? But it's there now. It's a beautiful building in the Porter Square area. To do something that would be kinetic, something that would show our commitment to the arts. And all I can say, it's the gift that keeps on giving. And it's really for the students and for the community, but primarily for the students and then the faculty and then the community. It's been an incredible gift. You guys were the brainchild for this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So some of you, many of you know I'm an architect, and some of my colleagues are here from my office, very talented group of architects. I'm so fortunate to do what I do and have people who work with me to do what we all do together. And I've been an architect practicing architecture for almost, if you can believe this, 40 years. That's my day job. The other job that I have is being the chair of the Lesley board, which really isn't that much work. You all should try it sometime. And we have a terrific board, let me tell you, and we have a terrific new president, Janet, who just joined us this past summer. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to read you at first something that attracted me to this university 20 years ago. And it comes from Lesley University's mission statement. Lesley prepares socially responsible graduates with knowledge, skills, understanding, and ethical judgment to be catalysts shaping a more just, humane, and sustainable world. I can tell you we could use a lot more of that these days. And that mission statement was what attracted me originally, one of the several things that attracted me to Lesley University over 20 years ago. And I have to say those words really mean even more to me today. This evening I'm going to be talking about the resurrection of a family name and its legacy and the reincarnation of the family's home in Berlin. Both my parents fled Nazi Germany. My father in 1933 and my mother in 1938. Each with their own story of narrow escape. My mother was from Hamburg. Her father and uncle were the partners in the architectural firm called Gerson & Gerson. And many of their buildings still stand in the middle of Hamburg. They were known as expressionist architects. My mother was an artist. My father, Karl, was from Berlin, and he is the connection to the Mosse name. His stepfather was Hans Lachmann Mosse. My father was a professor of physics at that place over there called Harvard University. And my parents met in Berkeley, California, where both their families settled after fleeing Germany. Both of them went through separate time periods, as I just mentioned, through the Panama Canal, up the West Coast, and through the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco Harbor. I remember many years ago asking my mother what it was like to literally pack a suitcase, leave her home with her family, and the majority of the contents in her home behind her. You can imagine your home today, packing a suitcase and leaving it all behind you, everything, going off to a new world. Her answer has touched me to this day. She said, "You know, Hans, we never thought about it on those terms. We had each other." Designing a new building on land owned by my ancestors represented an awesome task for me as an architect. It was an incredible challenge and responsibility. The building is named after Rudolf Mosse, a name that was erased over 60 years ago following the January 1933 when the Nazis rose to power, marking the beginning of the Third Reich. Born in 1843, Rudolf Mosse was a progressive liberal voice and a philanthropist in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He founded a publishing and advertising empire consisting of 130 newspapers and journals, including the flagship newspaper, the Berliner Tageblatt, sort of the New York Times of the day. His outlets were all over Berlin and the countryside. He was one of the wealthiest and most influential men in all of Germany. So we're talking about an individual at the end of the 1800s who actually got involved in the newspaper publishing industry by coming up with this brilliant idea of connecting advertising to papers, to the paper business. So by de facto, he became a publisher when he saw that that was a terrific opportunity or a terrific business to get into. It's revolutionary. Understanding the importance of education, he founded a boarding school in Berlin for impoverished children. He insisted that it serve an equal number of Jewish and Christian children. As philanthropists, the Mosse family was always involved in projects helping the economically disadvantaged in the working class districts of Berlin. Rudolf Mosse built his Berlin home on Leipziger Platz 15. It was known as the Mosse Palais, shown in color there, where 15 is. The octagon-shaped plaza was originally laid out in 1737 as a symbolic entrance and gateway to the city. Leipziger Platz was used by the Prussian royal family, including Frederick the Great, en route to Potsdam Palace and Sanssouci. Architecturally, it was one of the most distinguished spaces in Berlin. In the 1920s and 30s, over 4,500 streetcars crossed Leipziger Platz each day. The area was full of life and vitality and perhaps a little bit of chaos. This must be one of the calmer days. But you've got everything going on here. We've got trolleys, we've got buses, we've got people wandering aimlessly through the streets, horses. There's a conversation going on there down at the bottom right-hand corner. And by the way, this tower has a gentleman sitting in there trying to control the lights. That was the first traffic light in the world. And I don't know if anybody's even observing it all, but it did tend to work. And this place was just humming. The Palais contained an enormous art collection amassed by Rudolf Mosse. The art collection was considered one of Germany's richest and most magnificent collections. The building was open to the public, similar to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Today, this art collection represents one of the largest art restitution projects in Germany, with well over 1,000 works registered in the Lost Art Database. The project is known as the Mosse Art Restitution Project and is being led by my brother, Roger. More on that subject later. This is the back side of the building, a courtyard on one side, the side facing what's called Weststrasse, and the other side facing the square, or the octagon, it was called the octagon. Upon Rudolf Mosse's death in 1920, his son-in-law, Hans Mosse, and by the way, we're going to get a lot of Hanses tonight. I feel right at home in Germany. And oh, by the way, I'm still waiting for somebody from America to pronounce my name properly. We have the Consul General here from Germany. She can pronounce my name properly. During this time that my my step-grandfather, Hans Leckmann Mosse, was in charge. During the daytime, the area around Potsdamer Platz and Leipziger Platz was one of Europe's major urban centers and a symbol of Berlin as a metropolis. In 1933, everything changed. The Berliner Tageblatt, it was an outspoken critic of Adolf Hitler and the National Socialists. The Mosse family became a symbol of the hated, quote, Jewish press. The Nazis confiscated the holdings of the Rudolf Mosse Company, including all the newspapers, all the family's properties, and the prized art collection. Hitler's chancellery was constructed literally across the street from the Mosse house. The art collection was auctioned off. So here's a little map where it says 21, that's Leipziger Platz, and in the middle is where the Mosse house was, and literally across the street is the chancellery and Hitler's offices and grounds. This is one of the catalogs that was published to accompany the sale of the collection in 1934. This document would play a significant role in identifying the looted art pieces 80 years later. Then came the war. Leipziger Platz was reduced to rubble by Allied bombings in 1945. You can see to the left is Hitler, is the chancellery, and somewhere in all that mess to the right is Mosse Palais. In 1961 came the construction of the infamous Berlin Wall, separating an isolated West Berlin from communist East Berlin and East Germany. Leipziger Platz became an urban no man's land. Complete destruction was accomplished. History was erased with hardly a trace. You can see in the photo, go back one second, the shape of the street of the octagon. And the space that was created between what was on the right is the east, and the left, and this immense space in between. If you follow up a little further north on this is the Brandenburg Gate, which became part of the east, and then the Kreuzstadt. So I'm going to give you a geography lesson next. So in blue is, during this time period, West Germany. In red is communist East Germany, and that yellow dot is Berlin. So the wall was really not just a wall that went through and separated all of West from East. It was a ring, and it was a wall not to keep the people inside from getting out. It was a wall from keeping people from the outside getting in. In West Berlin, the Potsdamer Platz overlook, if any of you visited it this time frame, provided a glimpse of the space that once was. This is a photo I took when I visited Berlin in 1982 with my brother for the first time. We knew a little bit about our German roots, but we had no idea the extent of our family history in Berlin. Our parents had shared very little of their painful past with us, which is not an uncommon thing. And so if you look at this photo, pretty much where you see those little white crosses, barricades, that's literally the center of the octagon. And between the street on the left, which is Vossstraße, and Leipziger Platz, that is the property that some years later I would be working on. The wall came down in 1989. So literally the street that we had seen full of activity back in the 1920s was rebuilt, and here it is, going right to left through the octagon. And in 1999, Germany was reunified and Berlin became a single city again. In 1993, the claim for restitution was settled and ownership of the Leipziger Platz property was restored to the Mosse family. A new chapter began, an opportunity to resurrect the Mosse family name, its place in history, and to participate in one of the largest reconstruction projects in the world. So as soon as we got ownership of the property, we had to put a fence around it. Liability issues. And here we are walking through, preparing locations to do some measurements and underground tests. And one of those underground tests is a bomb test. And luckily we found no unexploded bombs. But during the time period that I was working in Berlin, over almost 9 years, you would always hear bombs going off in the distance. It was like always. Because as construction was going on, unexploded bombs were being found and delicately removed and brought out to the outside of the city and exploded. The property was ultimately sold to a German developer, Hans Bluda. Why not? Another Hans. Bluda. Last name. There was no stipulation that a member of the family be involved with the property's redevelopment. Particularly this family member who happened to be an architect. At the time I was doing work in, of all places, Moscow. And I decided to meet this Hans who had purchased the property, and I flew into Berlin. I arrived at the Hilton Hotel on Gendarmenmarkt, where a note greeted me saying, "I will pick you up for dinner at 6 p.m. So I was waiting out the front door for, I was hoping, a nice big Mercedes-Benz, because that's all we see in Berlin. I want to sit in one of those. But instead, what comes up to the door is a pristine colored Buick Fifth Avenue. Look at that. What a dashy guy. He was a wild and crazy guy. Anyway, he was just a great personality. The two Hunses had a great time together. A little while later, he asked me if I would be the architect for the redevelopment of the Mosse property, and I said, okay. It's a little more complicated than that. But by the way, the tie in the picture is this tie I'm wearing. The master plan, wait a minute, where are we? Okay. The master plan for over 10 million square feet had already been created by the city for the Potsdamer Leipziger space, with some of the properties controlled by world business powerhouses such as Daimler-Benz, Sony, and ABB. By the way, this is just one part of the city. Where the darkish colors you see those are all brand new buildings. Not to mention many of those whitish looking structures are all being renovated. We're talking new construction. Everything you see here is this darkish color. And this is all over the city. Remember, see this little line going up? We're looking east side, west side in this particular view. The master plan, which dictated the development of our property, was based on what was called critical reconstruction, a theory regarding the reconstruction of Berlin. Hans Stimmann, oh no, another Hans, was Berlin's director of city planning. At the time, it was his responsibility to oversee the urban design of the city. The three Hanses did eventually get together when it was time to have our project approved. The goal of the master plan was to return to the traditional living city urbanism, encouraging development that mimicked pre-World War II Berlin. Requirements included maximum building heights, minimum setbacks, stone exteriors, not all steel and glass, 20% residential component. That's the part I really loved. Everyone was a pain in the neck from a development perspective. Every building you do must have, at least if it's a commercial building, have 20% residential in it, so it would maintain a city living. And all the buildings respecting the historical street grid and property lines. Like many cities, politics and power were part of the mix. So for example, the Sony Tower, the building over to the left there, one of them, exceeds the building height restriction originally imposed on its site and is constructed out of steel and glass. Our design work started with the basic master plan building blocks. And quite frankly, I really loved learning the new approach to city building. Also, a unique aspect of the site, as I mentioned before, was that the building fronted on two streets, Leipziger Straße, or Leipziger Platz, and Vossstraße in the rear of that view. The majority of the building was to be primarily office use, with the required 20% residential use on the upper floors. Now that we had established an approach, where's the majority of the building? There we have, that's another good view of it. Okay. Now that we had established an approach to the massing of the building, the skeleton, we were ready to create the face of the building, the facade, the visual representation back to the city of streets of Berlin, back to history. During my many walks in the evenings through East Berlin at this time frame, I was struck by how many buildings had the markings of machine gun fire. It was as if I was on a stage set. And I suppose your mind, I mean, this is one building, there were many, and these were all on the east side. The east government was very poor, and they had no money to fix these buildings, only to pump heat and heat into them and put new windows in. And today, when you walk through these areas, these buildings have been repaired. I know this building. And you still see traces of this on the buildings, and I appreciate seeing the traces left there. And it's to some extent, it's there for you to see if you see it, if you choose to see it. Many people walk by with their ice cream cones or whatever and don't really see it, but it's there. And I have to say that Berlin has done an amazing, incredible job in rebuilding a city and not trying to cover up the past and giving clues, always connecting to the past. The original Mosse Palais was 22 meters high with a pronounced base, middle, and top. A focal tower marked the center of Leipziger Platz. A splendid frieze graced the top of the building. The house reflected the liberal values and prominence of the Rudolf Mosse family in Berlin. I wanted to express this prominence in the new building. The base of the building was designed to be open and inviting while having a sense of permanence and stability. I wanted the eye to travel up the facade to a defining focal point that has now become known as the crown, marking the center of the Platz. The Mosse name was permanently placed on a stone band at the original height of the frieze. That name can never be removed. The new building echoes the original building while having its own identity. When I say new, this is 20 years ago. I wanted a design that would reverberate for many years, one that would speak to the past, present, and future. As an architect, I had a choice. I could have done an intervention, as we call it in architecture, something to call attention to itself, and make a mark, make a point. I have no interest in doing that. I was interested more in creating a gesture for the future that recognized the past, that bring past, present, and future together. Construction began on July 6, 1995. The initial construction occurred with great celebration and publicity. It was at the same time as the rebirth of the Reichstag. Prior to renovations, it was wrapped in more than 1 million square feet of aluminum-colored fabric by the famous environmental artists Christo and Jean-Claude, symbolizing a new beginning. It was at once a work of art and a cultural event. As the Mosse construction moved forward, Hans Strauch had a terrific idea to help bring further attention to the project and to enhance our commitment to reconciliation. Let's give some space in the building to an important American Jewish organization for 10 years free rent. I was flying high on that one. I didn't have to fly home. I was already flying. Wow. What an amazing opportunity. After meeting with several organizations in the United States, I was introduced to the American Jewish Committee. And it was during this process that I met David Squire, who is with us this evening, a member of the Board of Governors for the American Jewish Committee. David was my first initial contact with the AJC. It was really because of David that after several meetings with AJC officials, I became convinced that the American Jewish Committee was the right choice to be the building's first occupants. A deal was struck. David, all I can say is you and I have not aged one bit. More about David a little bit later in this speech. To me, there is nothing more exciting than to see a new building emerge. Quite frankly, I love the smell of concrete. I'm sorry. My wife thinks I'm crazy. And there was a lot of concrete curing. It's called curing, not drying, by the way. Curing in Berlin during this time frame, and I was in heaven. We visited a quarry and chose the location of the stone that would be used to clad the new building. The installation took over a year. Architecture, in my opinion, is not frozen music. A building has a life of its own and interacts with the community in which it exists. It supports human activity and interaction. For this building, I felt facing the history of the property would be necessary to inform the design. On February 9th, 1998, the Mosse was completed and the American Jewish Committee moved into their offices at a central location at a time when the city of Berlin was redefining itself. A mezuzah was placed on the doorpost as a sign of faith. My Uncle George, Mosse, a world-renowned professor of European history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, delivered the following words at the opening of the celebration. I do have to say words are important. It is both gratifying and fitting that the American Jewish Committee will have its future home in the Mosse Palais. An important continuity in the German Jewish tradition is preserved. This house was the residence of my grandparents. The house symbolized the deeply held liberalism of a tolerant and educated bourgeoisie, a liberalism which was reflected in the Mosse publishing enterprises, and above all, by the Berliner Tageblatt. Let us remember as we rejuvenate this house the traditions which were once shared by Germans and Jews alike, the traditions of a better Germany. I would like to recall the figure which once graced the facade of the Mosse Palais as providing a signpost to the happiness of its new inhabitants. A large female figure held a mirror in her right hand, while the left hand supported the bird of wisdom. The inscription read, "The Enlightenment." May the spirit of the Enlightenment, in spite of the past and even some nationalist tendencies in the present, once again guide this house. The building stood for several years while the rest of the city grew around it, stood alone. It was one of the first buildings to be reconstructed in the no man's land, also known as the death strip of the Berlin Wall, a wall that symbolized the Cold War. Well, here's the progression from 1987 to 2000, wall, opening, building, waiting for everyone else to come, please. And this red building, by the way, was an ingenious concept of the city to create a visitor center. It's a temporary building, beautiful building. People could go up on the roof. You can see sort of out of focus, but up there on the platform, visitors could come to this spot and see a whole new city coming up around. As we waited for the other buildings to be completed, an interesting story emerged related to the Mosse Palais art collection. In the original building's courtyard stood a fountain that was designed by the German sculptor Walter Schott in the early 1900s. It was known as the Three Dancing Maidens. It was purchased by Rudolf Mosse and placed in the courtyard as a symbol of vital serenity and optimism, qualities he owned until his death in 1920. When the Nazis confiscated the property, they stole the artwork, including the sculpture. This photo shows the same sculpture sitting in the Conservatory Gardens in Central Park, New York City. It is known as the Untermeyer Fountain. For several years, we thought it was the actual one from the Mosse Palais. Turned out it was not. It's a good story, though. Almost got here. Connection to New York City through that. There were several castings. The original one, we know, sits on the grounds of this hotel called the Schlossberg Schlitz Hotel, which is 1.5 hour drive northwest of Berlin. The sculpture is included in the Mosse Art Project, our restitution project, and is yet to be restituted. Many other pieces have been identified, and some have been returned. For example, another interesting story. Around the turn of the century, Rudolf Mosse commissioned August Gall's called Reclining Lion. He displayed the lion in the sculpture hall of his home on Leipziger Platz. When Hitler came into power, the property was rebranded as the headquarters of the Academy of German Law, a kind of Nazi think tank run by the vicious anti-Semite Frank, who later became the governor of Nazi-occupied Poland. The lion was moved to the courtyard, replacing the Three Dancing Maidens, presumably because the lion was viewed by Nazi officials as a much more fitting symbol. Frank, who oversaw the murder of hundreds of thousands of Polish civilians and millions of Polish Jews, was executed in 1946 by the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg. In 1945, the Red Army overtook Berlin, raised the Soviet flag over the Reichstag. The lion was discovered in the ruins of the Palais. There's the lion looking across. 3 Red Army soldiers pose with the Mosse lion. The lion ultimately became part of the East Germany National Gallery collection. It was successfully restituted in 2015, and in 2016, it was sold back to the German government. It now sits prominently in the entry hall of the new James Simon Gallery in central Berlin. The gallery opened this past summer. Last February, my brother and I traveled to Dusseldorf to officially receive this Peter Paul Rubens painting, which was successfully restituted. It was in the collection of the city's art museum. It was recently sold at auction. What was once an empty space dividing 2 cities and 2 countries has been reunified. Leipziger Platz and Potsdamer Platz have now been completely rebuilt. Finally, the Mosse Palais rests within an existing context. Last year was the 20th anniversary of the building. Recently, the American Jewish Committee renewed its lease. The building continues to represent a stable asset to its present owners. The Mosse Foundation, for which Roger and I, my brother Roger and I are co-presidents, was originally established by our Aunt Hilda, granddaughter of Rudolf Mosse. Hilda settled in New York City after fleeing Germany and became a child psychiatrist and dedicated her life to improving mental health for marginalized children, particularly in Harlem. 20 years ago, I decided to honor the Mosse family legacy by partnering with an educational institution with the same commitment to education and social justice as ours. This is how I found Lesley University. After an extensive search, it was David Squire, again, who helped facilitate the winning connection. He introduced me to his wife, Patricia, who happens to be here as well. Patricia was a trustee of Lesley University. Patricia introduced me to then Lesley University President Margaret McKenna, and my treasured relationship with this university began. Pat and David, I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for me. Pat and David Squire are the founders of the Threshold program here at Lesley. Folks, look it up, the Threshold program. Google it, not now, later. It is one of our most transformative programs here. Pat and David, you are outstanding members of our Lesley community and the community at large. All I can say is thank you for everything you have done. Years ago, I took my 2 daughters to Berlin for their first visit. Next. Sorry, I'll do it. Technical difficulties. All right, we need help. All right, we're getting help. Okay, that's it. My book pushed on the wrong button. Thank you. We'll see if the clicker will work on the next one. 3 years ago, I took my 2 daughters to Berlin for their first visit. I felt it was important for them to learn about their ancestors. Someday they will have to carry the torch. We are now German citizens having dual citizenship. we took advantage of a law that allows direct descendants of German citizens who lost citizenship for racist, political, or religious reasons to become naturalized citizens. Another property that was returned to the family was the Mosse Zentrum, headquarters of the original Mosse publishing house, designed by the famous expressionist architect Erich Mendelsohn in 1923. My step-grandfather, Hans Lachmann Mosse, had a very close relationship with this architect. Some of the architects here would know Erich Mendelsohn. And he basically gave him his first major commission. And this was it. It was destroyed by Allied bombings, and ultimately the Berlin Wall went literally right through it. Recently, it has been restored to its original design. As architects, my firm has been involved with several other projects in Berlin, all located in the eastern side of the former wall in the Mitte district. These building designs include office and residential structures. One of them, this lower left-hand one, near Checkpoint Charlie. In 2015, Germany commemorated its Day of Unity to mark the 25th anniversary of the unification of East and West Germany. In Berlin, lights traced where the Berlin Wall once existed. In conclusion, a great European city has been rebuilt and the Mosse name has been restored. It was a terrific opportunity for me individually as an architect. To design a building on a site of historic significance, to resurrect an important Jewish name, to create a home for the American Jewish Committee at a pivotal time in Berlin and Germany's history, and to be the first building constructed in the no man's land of the Berlin Wall, a symbol of the Cold War, was an extra special and rare opportunity. And I can't think of a better place for me to deliver this story than here at Lesley University, an institution committed to the connection between arts, education, and social justice in a way that aligns with my family's legacy and values. Two words come to mind: justice and hope.
Thank you so much, Hans. That was extremely generous, and what an amazing story for you to share with us. At this point, Hans is willing to take questions. So if you want to come up to the mic, or if you can stand up and speak loud, that's fine as well.
Could you say more about the art collection and what's happening with restoration of it?
So I knew there would be lots of questions about here. There is a website, Mosse Art Project. You can Google Mosse Art Project to find out more about it. And it's hard work, very hard work. And I am not in charge of it, thank goodness. I got 2 day jobs. And it takes a certain talent to manage that kind of program, which is what my brother is doing in his quote-unquote spare time. It is difficult. There are what we call the low hanging fruit, which obviously would be items that are found in museums. But when there are items that are in private collections, not so easy, maybe impossible. So you can imagine the challenges involved, the galleries who have sold these pieces. So I'm not going to get into all the technicalities of it. It's a very, very challenging. But apparently a piece was just, my brother sent me a news break from yesterday. A piece was restituted from a museum in some city, which I don't even know how to say the name, in New York. Not a usually valuable piece. We're talking many pieces, not of great significant value. Some of them okay, but we're not talking Monets and Picassos and Cézanne. But these were important artifacts in their time, and it's a project that we feel is an important one for us to continue to work on. There you go.
Other questions?
Were you able to get the original plans for that Mendelssohn building and also the newspaper building?
Yeah.
They look identical.
So, it looks identical in the picture.
I'm not an architect.
It's almost impossible to make it identical. And by the way, let me just be clear, I'm not the one who did that project. It was, we were involved with it, but I was not the architect for it. Very good architects were involved. Yes, there was documentation that was available for us. And just over that sort of corner entry, just above it are windows. That's where my step-grandfather used to sit. This was his office. And my grandmother, she was in the process of being divorced and remarried. I was going into all these details. But she used to bring him a paper bag lunch every day, and he would have it in that office. That was the beginning of a beautiful relationship that somehow got me involved in all this. But yeah, it's a terrific building. It's Mendelssohn, the architect Mendelssohn, was a close friend of the family, and perhaps not as much appreciated architect, although I have to say, I mean, worldwide, not studied a lot by students, but I think he had a fairly somewhat significant influence even on Frank Lloyd Wright, who I think most everybody in this room knows. Great architect from Germany. Any other questions? Yes, David, my buddy David.
Hans, can you tell us a story about the property getting back to your family? Wasn't it well known in Berlin that it was one of the original parcels given back from the mayor, a special event?
So, first of all, in order to get a property back restituted, one had to have, one still has to, excellent paperwork, excellent documentation. So even though it may have been well known, documentation was absolutely required. And we were fortunate that there was a lot of documentation which allowed our family to have one of the, if not the first, successful restitution claim. So as far as people's knowledge of the Mosse name and the property, I'm not sure it really, when I was going there, it was really that big a deal, really. I think it had been pretty much nil. It had really needed some, if you got to the history books, yeah, there it is. But I don't think the name was understood at the time when I was going there, and we are changing that now. Thank you.
There's a question back here. Someone, you had your hand raised, yeah.
Okay, now we'll go back to this. Yeah.
Yes, I'm wondering if you know the year in which the borders were sealed. Your mother and father were able to get out in the 1930s, as did Albert Einstein.
Right.
to come to America, and he goes to Princeton. And is it the beginning of World War I when Jews could no longer leave, the borders are sealed, and they're rounded up?
Well, I don't know, I can't speak about World War I. I think in that time frame, there were no significant issues between Gentiles and Jews. Now, again, I'm not a historian, but what I can tell you though is in 1933 is when the Third Reich came into power, January 1933, and it was just literally at that time frame that my father and his family had to go because they were known as the press, the bad people. They had to get out, and my grandfather was at gunpoint told to, well, actually the gun was sitting on the desk saying either, you have to sign those papers and hand everything over to us, and which he did if you want to live, and he got out. And so 33, my father's family, 38, my mother's family, they were in Hamburg, and they were, like many others, thought this thing would just sort of blow over. It didn't exactly blow over. And they waited so long, they had to get a sponsor here in the United States in order to come to the United States. And that happened finally with a family on the West Coast. How did it happen? You're dealing with mail going back and forth over the ocean. And that's just blows my mind. An interesting story, though, and I told you about what my mother said about her family and her possessions, and the fact that they had each other, and that was the value system. Another interesting story is that the night before they were going to leave, that they had their papers together, my grandmother said that to my mother, Maria, we need to say goodbye to your father. He had died a number of years earlier, and he was resting in the cemetery about 1.5 miles away from their homes. And in the middle of the night, with the little stars and a curfew in place, if you get caught, it's all over. They ran through the street lights, the trees, and went to the cemetery to say goodbye. They risked their lives. My mother didn't know what was going on. She was too small to realize at the time. They risked their lives to say goodbye to her deceased father or husband. So this is a totally different, amazing value system that existed. I always found amazing. I think by 1939, no one was leaving, no Jews were leaving Germany.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, good.
I was just curious if, as a result of your work here, you have been called on to get involved in other replacements, renovations of historically, culturally significant buildings where there was this heavy historical communal I mean, it's obviously not a common thing.
No, not a common thing. Well, the answer is no. Maybe it's to a certain extent is I didn't go around telling the story a lot. In fact, there are people who know me for a long time in this room who now the story is told. And really, no, I didn't feel that it was so personal that I could go out there and make this case. I have to say there are other architects that have done splendid work in this area. Daniel Liebeskin's Jewish museum in Berlin, I think, is outstanding. And he too applied his sensibilities to that project. Although he didn't have family, didn't have the same sort of relationship to the site that I have with this. So it would be an awesome task to do again. It was very emotionally charged. Challenge with architecture is it takes so darn long to build the building. And so you can't be emotionally drained for like 3 years. So anyway, maybe I'll do it again. Yes, Paul?
Hans, I have a question for you. Over the years of doing this, did you get any pushback from an encounter, any undercurrents of why are you doing this in such a way to kind of revisit the history? And so with what's happened over 20 years of doing it and what we're seeing now, do you sense a change in the attitude toward these kinds of projects that bring forth at the same time looking back, in the past and recognition and then moving forward?
Yeah, excellent question. I struggled with all those things you just mentioned. And actually, I have a hard time going back and looking at this. It was hard to do this because, as folks in my firm know, I like to move forward. And also in my life, I like to move forward. This happened. I did the best I could. I created something. And now I'm going to take on the next challenge. There were comments at the time, and I can perfectly understand that the architects in the art, or maybe artists too, in the community at the time, and even now, found the work to be quite, they would have preferred something far more modern, contemporary. And I understand why they would think that. But I was looking more at the cultural connection. And now the irony is I designed a building that I was hoping would just sort of speak to timelessness. And when you look at the square, it's the only building that looks like that. Everything else around it is sort of more boxy, contemporary or whatever, glass boxes with holes cut out. So anyway, I tried to do something. I feel whatever happened around it happened around it. That's like it's an expression of time, of culture. That's all fine with me. But as far as pushback by being my culture, my history, no, I didn't find any of that. I didn't feel any resistance. I did see other families, Jewish families, coming into Berlin in the early on, very mad, very upset. I want my land back, very charged. And I didn't find that very, at least for my approach, that's not my approach. I was more interested in moving forward, finding a way to bring people together, and maybe the architecture might reflect a little bit of that. So, yes?
This is a sort of personal question about your interior experience, about how this changed you and what you got out of it and how that informed your life now, besides your involvement now with Lesley, which is obviously lovely. How is, it's a public question, how has this changed you and how would you use this as an example that other people would have the opportunity to have such a difficult transformation to something else?
Yeah. Well, now you're moving into the spiritual. I was fearful of questions, just move me in that direction. Life is hard. It has lots of challenges. Some you can control, and many you can actually control. Some you can't. And to a certain extent, if I can go through a day and lift another person up and make them feel better about themselves, I have made my day. That's all I can say. Upstairs, we can all chat a little bit more. Thanks.